You know that feeling when you're about to do something important and your brain just goes completely blank? Not because you forgot, but because there's this invisible wall between you and the action itself. You can see what needs to be done. You know it matters. You might even feel anxious about not doing it, but your body won't move. And then someone calls you lazy and you believe them, because what else could it be? I spent 3 decades thinking I was broken in some fundamental way. I thought I lacked discipline, willpower, character. I watched people around me just do things, normal everyday things, and I couldn't understand how they made it look so easy. Starting a task felt like trying to push a car uphill with the parking brake on. But here's what nobody told me, what I only discovered after finally getting diagnosed in my 30s. My brain wasn't lazy. It was just wired to run on a fuel system that almost never had enough in the tank. Living with undiagnosed ADHD as an adult is like playing a video game where everyone else can see the instructions on the screen, but yours are invisible. You're supposed to know how to play. You're supposed to just figure it out. And when you can't, when you keep making the same mistakes, missing the same deadlines, forgetting the same appointments, the world tells you it's a choice. They say you're not trying hard enough. You start to believe that maybe you're just not as capable as everyone else. Maybe you're fundamentally less than. But the truth is so much more complicated and so much more freeing once you understand it. ADHD isn't about being hyper or unable to focus on anything. For many adults, especially those who went undiagnosed for years, it's about focus that works completely differently. It's about having a brain that can hyper-focus on something interesting for 6 hours straight without eating or looking up, and then completely unable to spend 5 minutes on something boring but important. It's not that you can't focus. It's that your brain doesn't produce enough of the chemical that makes focus feel possible unless something is extremely stimulating, urgent, or new. If this is resonating with you, if you're recognizing yourself in these patterns, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to this channel and hit the like button. This kind of content about real experiences with neurodivergence helps other people find their way to answers too. And that matters more than you might think. So let me explain what was actually happening in my brain all those years. Dopamine is the neurochemical that helps your brain decide what's worth paying attention to and what actions are worth taking. It's like the ignition system in a car. When you have enough dopamine signaling, starting a task feels natural. You think about doing something, and then you just do it. There's no gap. But when your brain doesn't produce or regulate dopamine efficiently, which is what happens with ADHD, that ignition doesn't fire consistently. You turn the key and nothing happens. You turn it again. Still nothing. Meanwhile, you're sitting there feeling guilty because you know you should be moving, but the engine won't start. And here's the cruel part. Because tasks that are urgent, interesting, novel, or emotionally intense actually trigger dopamine release, your brain can suddenly work perfectly in those situations. You can pull an all-nighter and produce brilliant work right before a deadline. You can hyper-focus on a new hobby for weeks. You can handle a crisis with clarity and speed. So everyone around you, including yourself, thinks that when you can't do the boring administrative task or the routine chore, it must be a choice. If you can focus when it matters, why can't you just focus all the time? Because that's not how ADHD works. The crisis, the deadline, the novelty, those things are artificially creating the dopamine your brain needs to function. You're not lazy during the calm times. You're trying to start a car with no fuel. And constantly relying on urgency and stress to create that fuel is exhausting. It's like running your entire life on adrenaline and last-minute panic. You get things done, sometimes, but you're burning out from the inside. I used to think I had terrible time management. I'd plan to do something at 2 in the afternoon, and suddenly it would be 6, and I hadn't even started. I wasn't distracted by something else. I was just frozen. Or I'd sit down to work and spend 3 hours preparing to work, organizing my desk, making lists, finding the perfect music, anything except the actual task. People would say I was procrastinating, but it didn't feel like procrastination. It felt like my brain was buffering, like when a video keeps pausing to load. I was waiting for something to click into place so I could begin. What I didn't know was that my brain struggles with something called task initiation. It's not about knowing what to do or wanting to do it. It's about the neurological process of moving from intention to action. For people without ADHD, this process is mostly automatic. You think about doing the dishes, and a few seconds later, you're doing them. But with ADHD, there's a disconnect. The signal doesn't always get through. So you end up sitting there, full of intention, drowning in guilt, unable to explain why you just can't start. And the guilt becomes its own prison. You start every day promising yourself that today will be different. Today you'll be organized, productive, consistent. You make elaborate plans. You set alarms. You try every productivity system you can find. And some days, it even works. You have a good day, maybe even a good week, and you think you finally figured it out. You think you fixed yourself. But then it stops working again, and you crash even harder because now you have proof that you can do it, which means every time you can't, it must be your fault. This cycle of trying and failing and trying again, this constant disappointment in yourself, it does something to your soul. You start to see yourself as unreliable. You stop trusting your own commitments. You become afraid to promise anything because you don't know if your brain will cooperate when the time comes. You turn down opportunities because you're terrified of letting people down again. And the worst part is that you're so good at hiding it. You develop elaborate coping mechanisms. You become a master of last-minute miracles. You apologize constantly. You over-explain. You make jokes about being a mess. And nobody knows how hard you're working just to appear functional. What makes adult ADHD so invisible is that we've spent our entire lives building scaffolding around our struggles. We've learned to use anxiety as a motivator. We've trained ourselves to work in bursts of panicked productivity. We've structured our lives to avoid situations where our difficulties would be obvious. We look fine from the outside because we've become experts at compensating. But compensation is exhausting, and it doesn't fix the underlying problem. It just hides it. I remember the day I finally broke down and went to get evaluated. I was in my 30s, functioning on the outside, drowning on the inside. I'd lost another job because I couldn't keep up with the administrative parts, even though I was good at the actual work. I'd disappointed another person I cared about because I'd forgotten something important again. I was so tired. Not physically tired, but mentally and emotionally depleted from constantly fighting my own brain. And I thought, if this is just who I am, if this is the best I can do, I don't know how much longer I can keep going like this. Getting diagnosed didn't fix everything overnight, but it changed the entire story I'd been telling myself about who I was. Suddenly, all those years of struggling made sense. I wasn't lazy. I wasn't weak. I wasn't less capable or less intelligent or less worthy. My brain was just working with a different operating system, one that nobody had ever explained to me. And once I understood that, once I stopped fighting against my own neurology and started working with it, everything began to shift. Understanding ADHD as an adult isn't about making excuses. It's about finally having an accurate map of your own mind. When you know that your brain needs external structure because internal motivation doesn't fire consistently, you can create that structure without shame. When you know that your focus works in intense bursts rather than steady streams, you can design your work around that reality instead of constantly trying to force yourself into a pattern that will never feel natural. The strategies that work for ADHD brains are often the opposite of what we've been told to do. We're told to push through, to use willpower, to just focus harder. But willpower is a limited resource, and for ADHD brains, it runs out fast. What actually works is removing the need for willpower wherever possible, making tasks visible instead of keeping them in your head, breaking things down into steps so small they feel almost silly, using timers and external cues because your internal sense of time is unreliable, finding ways to make boring tasks more stimulating, whether that's through music, movement, or pairing them with something you enjoy. It also means being honest about what you can and can't sustain. Maybe you can't maintain a complex organization system, but you can put things in one designated spot. Maybe you can't focus for 2 hours straight, but you can do 3 20-minute sessions with breaks in between. Maybe you can't remember appointments without multiple reminders, so you set those reminders without guilt. These aren't failures, they're accommodations, and you deserve to accommodate your own brain. One of the hardest parts of accepting an ADHD diagnosis as an adult is grieving all the years you spent misunderstanding yourself. All the times you were punished or criticized for something you couldn't control. All the opportunities you didn't take because you didn't trust yourself. All the relationships that suffered because you seemed careless or unreliable when you were actually struggling. That grief is real and it's valid. You deserve to know. You deserve support instead of judgment. You deserve to understand that your brain wasn't broken, just different. But here's what I want you to hear, really hear. If you've spent years thinking you were lazy, if you've been carrying shame about not being able to do things that seem easy for everyone else, if you've been fighting your own mind without knowing why it feels like such a battle, you're not alone. And more importantly, you're not what you've been told you are. The struggle is real. The effort you've been putting in is real. The exhaustion is real. And none of it means you're less than anyone else. Your brain needs different conditions to work at its best. That's not a character flaw. That's neurology. And once you stop spending all your energy trying to be something you're not, once you start building a life that actually works with your brain instead of against it, you'll be amazed at what becomes possible. Not because you've fixed yourself, but because you finally stopped treating yourself like you needed fixing. The brain you have is the brain you have. It's not going to become neurotypical, but it doesn't need to. What it needs is understanding, patience, and strategies that actually match how it functions. What you need is to stop measuring yourself against standards that were never designed for how your mind works. You've been trying so hard for so long. You've been doing the best you could with the information you had. And that's enough. You're enough. If I could go back and tell my younger self anything, it would be this. You're not lazy. You never were. Your brain is just asking for something different than what the world taught you to give it. And when you finally understand what it needs, when you finally stop fighting and start listening, everything changes. Not into perfection, but into something so much better. Into self-compassion, into clarity, into the freedom of finally knowing yourself as you actually are.